For 30 years, Johnny Carson ran the most powerful room in American entertainment. He decided who was funny, he decided who was a star. A single laugh from Johnny Carson could launch a career overnight, and a single cold stare could end one just as fast. But here's the thing no one talks about. All that power, all that control, all that famous, unshakable cool, it had a weakness. And Hollywood's most dangerous woman knew exactly what it was.
Wait a minute, wait a minute.
What?
One night in your dressing room, I came a little early. And
Why did you do that? You never go visit the guests before the show.
Tonight, we are going backstage, past the cameras, past the cue cards, past the famous desk, and the perfectly rehearsed monologues. We are going into the green rooms, the dressing room corridors, the private conversations that happened after the director yelled cut. Because what happened in those spaces tells a story that the highlight reels never show.
That's a fine number.
Thank you. It's kind of a shock to your system, I've been
No, you're,
learning.
as I used to say, a striking figure of a woman. Yes, you are.
8 women. 8 times that the king of late night found himself on the wrong end of the power dynamic. 8 moments, some caught on camera, some reported by the people who were standing right there, where Johnny Carson, the man who rattled everyone, got rattled himself. We are starting with the woman who walked onto his set, sat down on his couch, and made him forget his own punchline. Live, on national television, in front of 15 million people. But before we get there, you need to understand something about the man these women were dealing with. Because if you do not understand who Johnny Carson really was, you will not understand why any of this matters.
Thank you.
Don't you look pretty tonight?
Thank you very much.
You ever get tired of hearing that?
No, never.
Johnny Carson took over The Tonight Show on October 1st, 1962. He was 36 years old, sharp as a razor, and already dangerous behind a microphone. What nobody fully anticipated was just how much raw electricity would fill that studio when certain guests walked through the door. Carson was married 4 times in his life. He had a reputation, documented and well known, for being intensely private, deeply guarded emotionally, and famously difficult to get close to. Even his own sons described him as distant. Even his closest colleagues said there was always a wall. But that wall had cracks. And Hollywood's most captivating women had a talent for finding every single one of them.
Hey, you look very, very pretty tonight.
How are you?
I'm just fine.
Thank you. You noticed something?
Yes, I certainly do. No, you've changed.
The Tonight Show was not just a talk show. It was the most watched program in America for decades. It was a cultural institution. And the couch, that simple, famous couch, became the most charged piece of furniture in the history of television. Because the women who sat on that couch were not ordinary women. They were icons. They were sirens. They were professionals at the art of being unforgettable. Some of them had their sights set firmly on the man behind the desk. Now, let us go backstage.
Raquel Welch is here tonight. She is truly a glamorous lady, and she's become a fine actress. She received the Nosotros Award and the Golden Globe nomination for her outstanding performance in the television movie Right to Die.
In 1967, Raquel Welch sat down on Johnny Carson's couch to promote Bedazzled. She was wearing something that the 1967 television audience was not remotely prepared for.
That's pretty nice, thank you.
Yeah, I don't believe you at all.
You don't?
Yeah, you were, 4 years ago? You haven't been here for 4 years?
Yeah.
You just, you look smashing, as they say.
Carson opened his mouth to deliver his first line. And then, and you can watch this, the footage exists, he stopped. Just for a beat, a half second. The timing that was always perfect went slightly, visibly wrong. He looked at her. He looked at the camera. He looked back at her. And then he said, with the expression of a man improvising in real time, "I think we should just skip the interview and stare at you for the next 12 minutes. The audience exploded. But here is what makes that moment genuinely revealing. That was not a prepared line. That was not in the monologue notes. Carson's writers confirmed in later interviews that he went off script entirely. Raquel Welch, by simply sitting down, had knocked the most disciplined timing in late-night television off its axis in under 15 seconds. And she knew it. She turned to the audience with the expression of a woman who had just confirmed a theory she already held about how the evening was going to go.
I don't know. That was
You're
not...
a fine-looking 40-year-old woman.
Well, just, now don't...
Over the course of her many appearances throughout the late 1960s and into the 1970s, Welch developed a very specific dynamic with Carson that his own production team described as unusual. Most big-name guests needed warmth from Carson, needed him to open up to them, put them at ease, bring out their best. With Welch, the energy ran in reverse. She came in already running, already in control, and Carson spent the interviews reacting rather than directing. Backstage, crew members from that era described Welch as someone who did not use the green room the way most guests did. Most guests sat, checked their notes, had their publicist fuss over them. Welch moved around. She talked to people, not as a star making effort, but as someone genuinely at ease in any space she occupied. She asked about your job. She remembered your name from the last time. She had a way of standing close enough that the conversation felt private even in a crowded room.
But I wouldn't leave the country again without saying goodbye to you.
I know you wouldn't.
Every time she leaves the country, she comes back
goodbye
here.
to you.
Says goodbye to me. Lots of girls have left the country after saying goodbye to me.
One camera operator who worked for the show for 11 years said in a published retrospective piece, "When Raquel came in, everybody stood a little straighter, including Johnny, especially Johnny." The pattern repeated on every visit. Carson would prepare a set of questions, enter the interview with his structure in place, and Welch would dismantle it within the first two exchanges. Not aggressively, not obviously, just by being completely, uncompromisingly herself in a way that made his preparation feel inadequate. What Raquel Welch did to Johnny Carson, in the end, was deprive him of the thing he relied on most, his sense of total control over the room. He never quite got it back when she was sitting across from him, and everybody watching could see it. But if Raquel Welch knocked Carson off balance on camera, the woman coming up next did something more dangerous. She apparently got him somewhere the cameras never reached, and the people who were there say the effect lasted long after the taping was done.
I tell you about her. She's an extremely talented actress. Beautiful. Miss Angie Dickinson.
Let us be direct about something. The other entries on this list involve flirtation, chemistry, tension, memorable on-air moments, documented and reportable, clear and factual. The Angie Dickinson entry is different, because the rumors that surrounded Angie Dickinson and Johnny Carson were not rumors about tension and chemistry and a charged green room atmosphere. They were rumors about an actual relationship. This was not whispered by tabloids. This was discussed, carefully, between the lines, with specific phrasing that entertainment journalists of that era used when they were trying to say something without saying it. In multiple serious retrospective pieces about Carson's personal life, Henry Bushkin's memoir, which was praised for its candor about Carson's private world, described a Carson who was deeply susceptible to certain kinds of women and whose personal life was considerably more complicated than his public image suggested. Dickinson and Carson moved in the same social world for years. They were both part of the extended circle that formed around Frank Sinatra and the entertainment industry's upper tier in the 1960s, a world of late nights and intimate dinners and the kind of friendships that could become something else without any particular announcement being made.
To exercise every day without fail. Now, do you think I would have succeeded on the 2nd of January?
So you make the same resolution every year? And
Dickinson was a serious actress, Dressed to Kill, Rio Bravo, and later the television series Policewoman, for which she received a Golden Globe nomination. She was not just beautiful, she was formidable. The combination, for Carson, appeared to be irresistible. On camera, their interviews were striking for a quality that went beyond the usual guest host warmth. Watch them. Carson uses her first name more than he typically did with guests. He does not rush her. He asks follow-up questions that go somewhere personal rather than looping back to the project she was there to promote. And she answered them, really answered them, in a way that spoke to a comfort level that went deeper than a professional appearance. In the green room before tapings, the backstage picture drawn by various crew members over the years was consistent. These two did not behave like host and guest. They behaved like people who knew each other. Well, in the particular way that you know someone when the relationship has had dimensions that the professional setting cannot fully contain. Nothing was ever publicly confirmed by either party. Carson and Dickinson were both people of enormous discretion and dignity. They took their private lives seriously. What happened between them, if anything beyond deep mutual admiration, belongs to them. But the rumors persisted for decades for a reason, and the people who were inside that building during the years when they overlapped most frequently have never quite let them die. Make of that what you will. But now, from the most serious entry on this list to perhaps the most fun, because the next woman did not bother with subtlety. She did not bother with ambiguity. She did not bother with subtext. She just walked into a room and turned it into a different room, and even the production staff could not stop talking about it.
Suzanne Summers.
By 1978, Suzanne Somers was the most talked about woman on American television. Three's Company was a phenomenon. Chrissy Snow was everywhere, and Suzanne Somers, in real life, was something that even the most enthusiastic fan of the show was apparently not fully prepared for. Here is a specific story that circulated among Tonight Show production staff from that period and has been referenced in multiple retrospective accounts of the Carson years. When Somers arrived for her first major Tonight Show appearance, she walked into the green room and, in the words of one production coordinator who has described the moment in interviews, introduced herself to every single person in the room by name, made direct eye contact with each of them, and within about 4 minutes had everyone slightly flustered, including the people who had been working there for 15 years. That is a specific skill. Not everyone has it. Suzanne Somers had it in abundance. With Carson himself, the dynamic played out in a very particular way. On camera, she was everything you would expect. Energetic, funny, physically at ease in a way that read on television as thoroughly intentional. She leaned forward. She laughed out loud. She touched Carson's arm at moments that were perfectly placed. She looked at him with an expression that the studio audience consistently reacted to, with a noise that was half laughter and half something more complicated.
Got flustered and oh, I know. Doing your show for the past 12 years,
Right.
I really learned the art of ad-libbing from you, really,
Thank you.
because there's no script here. This
Right.
is what happens.
It's
So
better to get out sometimes and just feel the audience and have a good time with it.
yeah.
Carson's response was to do the thing he did when genuinely caught off guard, and choosing to enjoy it rather than recover from it. He played along, hard. "You are going to be the death of me," he told her during one appearance. And the line got one of the bigger laughs of that particular episode, partly because of the delivery, and partly because it had the ring of something that was not entirely performance. A floor manager who worked that taping later described the backstage atmosphere as follows. She was turning it on for everyone, but there were maybe 30 seconds before she went out where it was just her and Johnny in the wings. And whatever she said to him in those 30 seconds, he came out smiling in a way that was different from the usual pre-segment smile. What did she say? Nobody knows. The floor manager said he was too far away to hear. But whatever it was, Carson walked out and delivered one of his sharpest Somers segments on record. Some people bring out the best in a room by being in it. Suzanne Somers brought out the best in Johnny Carson by saying something nobody else will ever know, 30 seconds before a live taping in a dark wing of a Burbank studio in 1978. That is a legacy worth noting. Now, from a woman who turned the charm up to 11 to one who turned it into something theatrical, enormous, and completely unignorable, the next entry is the only woman on this list who made flirting feel like a civic responsibility.
Around the circumference of the world, the globe, the
Well, I
planet.
was in Africa.
Yeah, parts of that
I
are
was
below
in
the equator.
India.
Well, so now,
Zsa Zsa Gabor was married 9 times. 9. She once said with a straight face, "I am a marvelous housekeeper. Every time I leave a man, I keep his house." This is who Johnny Carson was dealing with. The Zsa Zsa and Carson dynamic was unique on this list because it was entirely public, completely audacious, and absolutely hilarious. And underneath all of it was something that crew members and production staff identified over years of her appearances as genuinely personal. She called him darling from the moment she met him and never stopped. She kissed him on the cheek on arrival. She kissed him on the cheek on departure. She reached across the desk during conversations to hold his hand, pat his arm, or occasionally adjust something about his appearance that did not actually need adjusting. She looked at him, during interviews, with an expression that suggested the 20 million people watching were an imposition on a private conversation. Carson loved every second of it, and returned the fire with everything he had. "Zsa Zsa," he said during one particularly charged exchange, "how many times have you actually been in love?" She paused, a theatrical, perfect pause, looked at him and said, "Oh, darling, deeply in love? 3 times. In love enough to get married? 9. The audience lost their minds. Carson put his head down on the desk. But here's what made the Gabor appearances more than pure comedy.
One was only a half. It only lasted like about 3 weeks.
wow.
Do you know it's a mistake? It's wonderful what the young people do, and I'm believing in it now. You must live with them, and I was always against it.
Production staff who worked multiple Gabor tapings over the years have described something that distinguished her behavior with Carson from her behavior with other hosts. She prepared for Carson. She came in with specific material. Specific stories she had saved, specific jokes she had held back, that she deployed only on this show, for this audience, for this man. She treated it like a date, one longtime producer said. Every other show she did was an appearance. The Tonight Show was a date. She came dressed differently. She was sharper. She stayed longer. Whether that reflects genuine romantic interest in Carson specifically, or simply the recognition of a worthy opponent, a man who could actually match her, is impossible to say. Maybe, for Zsa Zsa Gabor, those were the same thing. She appeared on The Tonight Show more than almost any other guest across the full run of Carson's tenure. She never once walked out of that door without having kissed him at least twice. And Carson, who was not a demonstrative man, who kept physical warmth on a very short leash, never once seemed to mind.
Would you welcome Miss Anne Margaret?
Everything else on this list is subtext, inference, and backstage testimony. This one, Carson said himself. In multiple interviews across his career, Johnny Carson stated, on the record, directly, without being pushed, that Anne Margaret made him nervous. Sit with that for a moment. This is a man who interviewed every president from Nixon onward, who sat across from Frank Sinatra, Bob Hope, and Don Rickles, who hosted the Academy Awards, who once famously told a heckler to be quiet with 2 words and a look that caused the entire room to go silent for 3 full seconds. That man said Anne Margaret made him nervous. The backstage preparation for an Anne Margaret appearance on The Tonight Show was, by the accounts of writers and producers who worked those episodes, notably different from a standard taping. Carson came in over-prepared. His questions were sharper and more worked through than usual. His timing notes to himself were more deliberate. He was, by the assessment of people who watched him prepare for thousands of episodes, covering for something. What the footage shows is this. Anne-Margaret walks out from behind the curtain. The audience applause hits. And Carson, who greeted every other guest from behind the desk or at most halfway around it.
Terrible.
Oh, you like it?
How do you spell it? G-L-U-G?
G-L-O with two...
I've seen that, yeah. Now, what is that?
Has, let's see, vodka in it and brandy.
Gets completely to his feet and meets her at center stage. Not standard procedure. Not the usual protocol. A choice. She takes his hand, holds it a beat longer than a handshake, and says something directly into his ear before they walk to the desk together. The microphones do not catch it. Carson sits down, and for the first 45 seconds of that interview, his timing is a half beat slow. Anne-Margaret, by every account from every production she worked on across a 60-year career, was genuinely beloved by crew members in a way that transcended the standard star being gracious dynamic. She learned names. She showed up early. She treated the lighting technician with the same warmth she turned on the director. And the warmth she turned on Carson, according to a production assistant who worked that specific taping, was something else again. It was not a performance, the assistant said in a 2009 interview. I have been in this business 30 years, and I know the difference between a performance and something real. What she gave him was real. Whether it went anywhere beyond a charged green room and a slow opening 45 seconds, no one has documented. What has been documented is the admission. In his own words, on the record. Anne-Margaret made him nervous, and Johnny Carson told the world.
I think is on the 11th of November. Would you welcome, please, Miss Lonnie Anderson?
WKRP in Cincinnati premiered in 1978. Lonnie Anderson was cast as Jennifer Marlowe, the station receptionist. And within one season, in the peculiar arithmetic of American television celebrity, Jennifer Marlowe was more famous than the show. What made Anderson unusual in the late-night context, and specifically unusual in the Carson context, was a quality that multiple entertainment journalists of the period struggled to name correctly. She was not the most formally trained actress of her era. She was not the most critically celebrated. But she had a gift for reading men that was, by various accounts, almost uncomfortably precise. She knew, within roughly 60 seconds of conversation, what a man wanted to hear and what he wanted to be. She did not manufacture that reading into flattery. She aimed it into genuine, targeted attention that felt specific rather than general. For Carson, a man who had spent decades receiving the general warmth of the entertainment industry aimed at him from every direction, who had become almost immune to being charmed because he understood the machinery of charm better than anyone, targeted attention was the one thing he had no particular defense against. The on-camera segments between Anderson and Carson have a specific quality. He showed off, not broadly, not in a way that an ordinary viewer would necessarily clock.
Out here, did you decide one day, hey, I'm going to Hollywood?
No, after graduating from college and
Right.
taught high school for a little while, I started doing...
You taught high school?
Yes.
Oh, good heavens.
But in the subtle ways that a man shows off when he is genuinely trying to impress someone rather than just performing competence. He pushed his comic timing slightly harder. His setups were sharper. He used callback references that required the other person to have actually been listening carefully. Anderson caught every one, live, without a beat of hesitation. The thing about Johnny, Anderson said in a later interview, with the ease of someone reporting a remembered fact rather than paying a compliment, was that he needed you to be completely present. If you drifted at all, he felt it immediately. So I never drifted. That is not a description of watching a talk show host. That is the language of two people who were genuinely paying attention to each other in a high-stakes room. Backstage, the extended green room visits before and after her tapings became something that production staff registered as unusual. Not scandalous. Not whispered about in any salacious sense. Just longer than necessary for the professional context. The kind of length that means both people wanted to keep talking. That is, arguably, the most honest form of pursuit. Not grand gestures, not manufactured drama. Just, I am not done talking to you yet, and neither are you.
We're giving you a 7 o'clock call for tomorrow morning, and I said, wait a minute, I don't have a contract or wardrobe or a script or anything. I can't shoot at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. I have nothing to wear. So I said, well, how about 2 o'clock and we'll let you go shopping in the morning. So that's what we did.
Morgan Fairchild was the only woman on this list whose specific social technique Carson discussed in public. During a 1982 taping, Fairchild had just finished a segment that had gone about 3 minutes longer than scheduled. After the broadcast, Carson was asked by a writer on the show why he had let it run. He said, in the casual tone of a man identifying something he found professionally interesting, she asked questions back. Most guests never ask questions back. She makes the interview feel like a conversation. That is a very specific observation about a very specific social skill. Most guests on The Tonight Show operated in transmission mode. They came in with their stories, their prepared anecdotes, their punchlines. They broadcast. Carson received. The dynamic was asymmetrical by design. He was the host, they were the guest, and the entire structure of the format reinforced that arrangement. Morgan Fairchild did not accept that arrangement. She would be mid-answer, pause, and turn the question back on Carson, not in a deflecting way, in a way that was clearly genuine. And Carson, who was genuinely bored by most interviews he had been conducting for 20 years, responded to genuine curiosity about himself with something rare in that chair. He opened up. Staff members who worked the Fairchild tapings in the early 1980s noted this pattern consistently. The conversation in the green room before the segment was reportedly almost indistinguishable from the on-air segment. It simply picked up wherever it had left off, which means she started before the cameras rolled and he allowed it, which means by the time the segment began, Carson was already in a different mode than he had started in. That is not an accident. That is a skill being deployed with the precision of someone who had studied her audience of one and made very specific choices about how to reach him. Carson clearly found it impressive. He told his own writing staff so. Coming up, the entry that is, by several Backstage accounts from the era, the most loaded of all 8. Because what happened between Carson and the final name on this list was captured on camera well enough that you do not have to take anyone's word for it. You can simply watch.
Well, I'm not sure, but it's funny you'd bring that on up wanting to get on Dallas, because actually I've been asked to offer you a part on the show by my producer.
Dallas premiered in 1978. By 1980, it was the most watched drama on American television. And Pamela Ewing, played by Victoria Principal, was one of the most talked about women in the country. When Principal came to The Tonight Show to promote the show's second season, something happened that producers clocked immediately and discussed afterward. Carson ran long. Not slightly long. He ran the interview 6 minutes over the scheduled segment length, cutting into the musical guest's setup time, in a way that the director had to signal him twice to rap before he actually did. 6 minutes is an eternity on late-night television. There was a production reality to The Tonight Show that most viewers never considered. Every segment is timed to the second. Carson knew this better than anyone. He had internalized the clock over 15 years to the point where he could feel 30 seconds the way a musician feels a beat. Running 6 minutes over was not an accident. It was not distraction. It was a choice. He leans forward with both forearms on the desk, a posture he used exclusively with guests he was genuinely engaged by, that producers called the lean internally because it was so recognizable and so rare. He does not check his note cards once. He does not look at the clock. He ignores 2 separate off-camera cues. And he keeps asking questions. Real ones. Not promotional questions about the show, not the scripted softballs that moved segments along. Questions about her life, about how she prepared, about what she wanted next. The kind of questions you ask when you want to understand someone. Principal, for her part, answered with a directness and honesty that was unusual for a promotional appearance by a major television star at the peak of their fame. She was not performing for the audience. She was talking to the man across the desk. I remember noticing, the show's talent coordinator said in a 2011 interview, that at some point they just forgot we were there. When the segment finally wrapped, 6 minutes late, director furious, musical guest staring at his watch, Carson walked Principal to the commercial break position and continued the conversation. Off camera, off mic, for another 4 minutes, while the crew reset around them. Nobody interrupted, nobody asked them to move. Some moments on a television set have a weight that everyone in the room can feel, even if no one discusses it afterward. This was one of those moments. Put all 8 of these stories next to each other, and something emerges that goes deeper than gossip. Johnny Carson spent 30 years being one of the most controlled human beings in American public life. The preparation was meticulous. The image was managed with extraordinary care. The emotional interior was kept at a significant distance from anyone who might have access to it. And yet, Raquel Welch made him lose a punchline. Angie Dickinson was the subject of rumors that refused to die for 30 years and are still alive today. Suzanne Somers said something in the wings 30 seconds before a live taping that nobody else will ever know. Zsa Zsa Gabor turned every visit into a date she had prepared for. Anne Margaret made him nervous. His words, not anyone else's. Lonnie Anderson found the specific frequency that cut through 2 decades of professional armor. Morgan Fairchild deployed a social technique precise enough that Carson described it to his own writing staff, and Victoria Principal made him run 6 minutes over schedule on live television, while his director signaled him twice to stop. That is not a list of coincidences. That is a portrait. A portrait of a man who was, underneath the desk and the monologues and the perfect timing and the 4 marriages and the famous emotional distance, a man who responded to remarkable women with the full, undefended force of genuine human feeling. He just spent 30 years being very, very careful about when he let you see it. And that is the real story of the King of Late Night. Not the performances you watched at home, but the moments that happened after the director said cut. If you enjoyed this, do us a favor right now. Hit the like button. It is the single biggest thing you can do to help this channel keep making content like this. And subscribe if you have not already. We go deep into Golden Age Hollywood. The real stories. The ones the studios buried. The ones the publicists tried to manage away. Drop a comment below. Tell us which of these 8 surprised you the most. And tell us who you think we missed, because this list could easily be twice as long. We will see you in the next one.